There are a few characters named Raiden out there, but I'm specifically referring to the character from the Metal Gear franchise. Raiden wasn't received particularly well by players after his original debut, but became much more popular after his next two appearances. However, despite his popularity, there are some common misconceptions about him that I'd like to address. Let's start with a little backstory. Raiden made his debut as the protagonist of the 2001 game Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty, voiced by Kenyu Horiuchi in the original Japanese dialogue and Quinton Flynn in the English dub. The story goes that Hideo Kojima, the man responsible for the franchise, received a letter from a fan who loved the original Metal Gear Solid, but didn't want to play as an old man. As such, when main artist Yoji Shinkawa was designing the protagonist for the next game in the series, Kojima specifically asked for an exceptionally beautiful young man, and thus, Raiden was born. One of the reasons Raiden's debut caused such backlash was due to the fact that his appearance as the new protagonist was completely unknown to players. The game even started with the player controlling Solid Snake, the protagonist of the 5 previous Metal Gear games: Metal Gear, Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, and Metal Gear Solid, as well as non-canon games Snake's Revenge, Metal Gear 2, and Metal Gear Ghost Babel. And even after switching to Raiden, led the player to believe for a short while that they were still playing as Solid Snake, only for a rather dramatic revelation of the true protagonist of the game. Through this technique, Kojima ensured that Raiden would be remembered, but perhaps not in the way he intended. Raiden was received well enough in Japan, but once he was introduced elsewhere, things went a little haywire. Players from the United States in particular were furious. They didn't want to play as this new character, they wanted to play as Solid Snake. They also took issue with Raiden's appearance and personality, likely worsened by their anger at being tricked into playing as someone other than the character they were expecting when they bought the game. This is when the earliest misconceptions about Raiden were born. Misconception number 1. Raiden is whiny. Raiden often was and sometimes still is perceived as whiny. However, this has less to do with his actual personality and more to do with how he is contrasted with Solid Snake. Snake is known for being a very tough character. Having been through 3 canon games already, he's seen and done some pretty crazy things, so he's usually very pragmatic. Raiden, on the other hand, is a known rookie on his first mission. He's not expecting to be confronted with a vampire, a woman who can't be hit with bullets, malfunctioning AI, his evil clone father, and his entire life as he knows it being a lie. And when he is, he actually responds in a very understated fashion. It seems overstated by virtue of his being placed next to Snake, but in reality, it's still very obvious that he's a trained soldier. Anyone who wasn't would have had a full mental breakdown before even reaching the halfway point of the game. Even many soldiers wouldn't have been able to manage it. Raiden, however, freaks out, but then picks himself back up and keeps going. He has very human emotions and expresses them. That is not the same as being whiny. But hey, if you think you could do all that without ever getting scared or upset,
why don't you do it?
Misconception number 2. Raiden is a misogynist. I see where this one is coming from. There are a couple of lines in which he says things that are downright sexist. However, I would like to point out to you that this is a trend in the series, and even in the same game we have lines from Rose that have the same general attitude. This indicates that it is not Raiden but the writers who find these things acceptable, and thus should not be blamed on him. Though if you wanted to make a case for Solid Snake being a misogynist, you'd have way more evidence for that. Misconception number 3. Raiden is abusive. I see where this one is coming from also, and I want to make it very, very clear that as an abuse victim myself, I do not want to ever seem like I'm condoning or downplaying abuse. However, coming once again from the point of being an abuse victim, I would argue that abuse is a pattern. While Raiden hitting Rose for breaking into his room was absolutely and inarguably wrong and should never have happened, and if you can't forgive him for that, I understand and will not try to convince you that you can't be angry about it, I do not believe that is an indicator of him being abusive. If that were the case, there would be an exponentially larger number of abusers in this world. Nobody is perfect and nobody can control their anger 100% of the time, especially someone who has the type of background Raiden does. It's actually impressive to me that he's this good at keeping it under control. And a single incident does not an abuser make. Remember, Rose specifically says he'd never done that before. Technically, she never even says he hit her, just that he raised his hand against her, but that is usually used to mean actually hitting someone, so I'll interpret it that way. Aside from one single incident, there is no indication in their dynamic that he is abusive. I'd argue that the exact opposite is true, but my thoughts on Rose would probably take a whole other video. Repeating just to make sure you understand, though, what he did was still wrong. And if you want to argue that it's actually totally okay and fine, then please never speak to me ever. Misconception number 4. Raiden is just a bad boyfriend in general. There are a few reasons people give for this. First, that he forgot their anniversary. This one is perhaps the weirdest to me since he's literally trying to stop an apparent terrorist attack. He has bigger things on his mind than their anniversary. Second, that he doesn't sleep next to Rose. This is fairly clearly something that he does because he is afraid of hurting her. Third, that he doesn't tell her about his past. This one is just silly because he doesn't remember his past. How's he supposed to tell her something that he doesn't know? Fourth, that he keeps her out of his room. Well, considering her reaction to seeing it was to say it was as empty as his heart, that seems like a pretty smart decision to me. Sure, he's not the best boyfriend ever, but he's not some asshole who doesn't care about her. He can't even tell her that her cooking is bad. Also, in case you forgot, Rose is literally a spy who only got into a relationship with him because of her job. This also explains why she's so desperate to get into his room and to know about his past. She's literally trying to dig for information on him for the Patriots. The reason their relationship sucks isn't because of Raiden, it's because of her. Let's move on to the next game, Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. This one, well, things got interesting in this one. This is where perceptions of Raiden generally shifted, largely because apparently being badass gives you long hair privileges. That is a joke, but honestly, it's also how some of you sound. Misconception number 5. Raiden and Sunny have a toxic relationship. Okay, I've actually only seen this take once, but it was so insane I have to include it. I can't even say anything coherent. Just, what? Misconception number 6. Raiden is whiny. Again. Can we just kill this take forever? Can we please? Yes, he has a breakdown. He's also recently lost almost his entire body and been forcibly converted into a cyborg, thus reinforcing the idea of him only being a killing machine. And when he's rejected by the person he admires most, when he can't even do the one thing people have been telling him he's good for his entire life, he has a breakdown. Oh no! How whiny! Come on! The next and final game in Raiden's storyline is the famous Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. This is the game where a really pervasive misconception was born, and I'm going to get into it as my last misconception for this video, so stay tuned for that. Misconception number 7. Raiden is actually out for revenge. Okay, I get why this one comes up. I mean, even the title supports it. But notice, Raiden doesn't get intense about things after the prologue. He doesn't get intense about things until Guadalajara, when he finds out exactly what's happening to those kids. It's got nothing to do with revenge here. He's trying to protect innocent kids so they don't end up like he did. Misconception number 8. Raiden and Jetstream Sam are rivals. They're really not. Raiden doesn't interact with or seek out Sam in any way unless Sam directly gets in his way. He doesn't feel anything special towards Sam that he doesn't also feel towards the other antagonists. He shows no drive to prove himself or to best Sam, and Sam, in turn, doesn't indicate any rivalry with Raiden either. There's literally nothing ever shown between them except Sam mocking Raiden via innuendo in their last match, which makes it odd that there's such a widespread community dedicated to the idea that they're canonically rivals, particularly in the ostensibly rivals actually in love department, because they're not. There's no real evidence to indicate otherwise. Misconception number 9. Raiden has a split personality. Again, this is another one that there's no real evidence for. Raiden never refers to Jack the Ripper as a separate entity in any way. He always talks about things that he personally has done, not someone else. There's no divide between them. They're the same person, plain and simple. Misconception number 10. Raiden is a sadistic, trigger-happy, murderous sociopath and/or just like Senator Armstrong. This is the big one. It's something I see a lot, often combined with the last misconception, and it's just so blatantly wrong. Yeah, he kills people in this game. Yeah, sometimes he does seem to get a kick out of it, as he was trained to as a child, but there is so much more evidence to indicate that that's not who he is. Look at how he treats Blade Wolf. He could have killed Blade Wolf, but he didn't. He felt sorry for Wolf and had him reconstructed and freed. Look at how he jumps right into danger to protect George and immediately switches tone with him afterwards. Look at how he doesn't go out of his way to hunt anyone down unless he absolutely has to. Look at how he only goes after Desperado himself because he knows other means won't work. Look at how he struggles to make himself kill policemen who are actively trying to kill him. Look at how he says no right before he goes into Ripper mode for the first time. Look at how he says, "I don't want this" for anyone else afterwards, clearly horrified and wishing the awful effects of his childhood weren't things he still had to deal with. Look at how he cares about Sonny. Look at the entire reason he's doing any of this, to save kids from ending up the way he did. And look at his behavior in the previous games. Look how he comforts Emma when she's afraid of water. Look how he apologizes to Sonny before cutting off his arm. Look how he throws himself into what, for all he knew, would have been certain death to save Snake. Look how happy he is when he sees his son for the first time. Look how much he clearly loves Rose despite everything she's done. Raiden isn't just decent. He's one of the kindest and most caring people in the series. He has one of the biggest hearts of anyone in the franchise, and it's time people acknowledged that. This, in turn, delegitimizes the idea that he's somehow just like Armstrong or could be Armstrong's successor. Raiden handles situations in a way that is very different from Armstrong. Armstrong is a selfish, cruel man who uses his position of power to hurt others. Raiden, on the other hand, spends most of the game trying to save people. Yes, he breaks the law in pursuit of his goals, but note, he specifically only does so because he knows that the atrocities being committed on Armstrong's orders can't be stopped through legal means. Raiden is willing to put himself at risk and hurt himself in order to save the kids Desperado is hurting, and Armstrong puts everyone else in between him and Raiden as well as uses nanomachines to protect himself. He's not willing to hurt himself for his goals, only others. The fact that Raiden hates him so much just serves to further proof that they're not the same. If they really were, Raiden wouldn't have been so opposed to Armstrong's plan. Two people may be willing to bend or break the rules in order to achieve a goal, but that doesn't make them the same or even similar. Raiden isn't willing to sacrifice innocent people for his own sake. Again, pay attention to how he struggles to fight the police when he thinks they might not have had a choice in the matter. But Armstrong is, as clearly evidenced by his quote about he can't fret over every egg. To Armstrong, others are tools to achieve his goals. To Raiden, they're people. Right down to the way they look at the world, Raiden and Senator Armstrong are completely different, and Raiden is not some trigger-happy sociopath willing to hurt the innocent for his own gain. So yes, you've probably been misunderstanding Raiden. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you found this video interesting. Comments are more than welcome. I love to talk about Metal Gear and especially Raiden. And if you want to see more videos on the topic or video games in general, please feel free to subscribe. I plan to make more videos in the future. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a great day.